Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. Extra amazing. Krystal, you're back. What do we have today?
Yes, nice to be back. And I'll be in for Ryan on Counterpoints tomorrow. So you're getting the full dose of Krystal this week, whether you want it or not. All right, so in the show today, we have Nate Silver joining the chorus of insiders calling on Biden to drop out. Is that actually going to happen? We will talk about that. An FBI informant was indicted for lying about Biden. This is someone that the Republicans and Fox News have really been relying on for their allegations against him. So that's an interesting one. Trump launched a sneaker line, and Saagar has some sartorial commentary that was really important to get into the show. I don't know if you guys have checked out the capabilities of this AI text-to-video generator called Sora, but it is pretty mind-blowing, especially the progress year over year is just like...
It's astounding.
It is insane. It's insane. A lot going on with regard to Israel. The U.S. is actually proposing a temporary ceasefire resolution to try to pass through the UN Security Council, so that is noteworthy, and it calls for them not to invade Rafah, at least not right now, so we'll take a look at that. I'm also reviewing the ICJ hearings yesterday with regard to Israel's illegal occupation, and Saagar is taking on a list of presidential rankings that he vehemently disagrees with, so a lot to get into this morning.
I was so angry about this, I spontaneously sat down and wrote a monologue. So anyway, I think you guys will enjoy it.
The things that trigger you are interesting sometimes.
Listen, there's sometimes just things happen. The record cannot stand. All right, before we get to that, we are making big plans here at Breaking Points. March 7th, going to be the State of the Union. We are going to have a State of the Union live stream. And so as an incentive for our subscribers who are going to be able to support our work, we're going to allow our premium subscribers to submit questions that us and the team will be able to answer. We'll have special guests and others all here at the desk as we go live before and after the State of the Union for a special show that you can join us on. As we said, premium subscribers will be able to submit questions that we will all take a tackle at here at the desk. So breakingpoints.com, if you can go ahead and sign up. We've got our election discount going on right now, so now is the time to do it. breakingpoints.com.
All right, so let's talk about what is going on in some elite circles with regard to our current president, Joseph Robinette Biden. Nate Silver, he's independent now, but he's still very much an insidery, respected kind of a guy.
Yes, that's right.
Very much respected in insidery circles. So quite noteworthy that he joined Ezra Klein, and we'll get to that in a moment, in actively calling on Biden to drop out because primarily of concerns over his age. Let's put this up on the screen. Nate wrote out a lengthy piece explaining his thinking and explaining how his thinking has changed with regards to Biden and the need for him to drop out of the race completely. So he writes in part, "Personally, I crossed the Rubicon in November, concluding that Biden should stand down if he wasn't going to be able to run a normal re-election campaign, meaning things like conduct a Super Bowl interview. Yes, it's a huge risk, and yes, Biden can still win." Go on to the next part. "But he's losing now, and there's no plan to fix the problems other than hoping that the polls are wrong or that voters look at the race differently when they have more time to focus on it." He concludes, put this up on the screen, "The only option now is for Biden to step aside, perhaps in response to peer pressure from Democratic leaders and people inside the White House. This is a real option, however. Don't let anyone gaslight you into believing otherwise. The Democratic convention is not until August 2nd. This is an option that Biden, the White House, and Democratic leaders need to seriously consider." As I mentioned before, this was in response to a podcast essay that Ezra Klein released. Ezra Klein now being a columnist at the New York Times, or I guess a podcaster for the New York Times. Ezra also having a lot of sway and influence in elite circles, especially from his perch at the New York Times. Let's take a listen to a little bit of the argument that he made with regards to why Joe Biden should drop out of the race.
I think one reason Democrats react so defensively to critiques of Biden is that they've come to a kind of fatalism. They believe it is too late to do anything else. And if it is too late to do anything else, then to even talk about Biden's age is to contribute to Donald Trump's victory. But that's absurd. It is February. Fatalism this far before the election is ridiculous. Yeah, it's too late to throw this to primaries, but it's not too late to do something. So then what? Step one, unfortunately, is convincing Biden that he should not run again, that he does not want to risk being Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a heroic, brilliant public servant who causes the outcome she feared most because she didn't retire early enough. That in stepping aside, he would be able to finish out his term as a strong and focused president, and people would see the honor in what he did in putting his country over his ambitions. The people who Biden listens to Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, Mike Donnellan, Ron Klain, Nancy Pelosi, Anita Dunn. They need to get him to see this. Biden may come to see it himself. I take nothing away from how hard that is, how much Biden wants to finish the job he has started, keep doing the good he believes he can do. Retirement can be, often is, a trauma. But losing to Donald Trump would be far worse.
So it's very interesting because Ezra is like the ultimate neoliberal. I mean, he was, came to prominence as like the Obama guy. He's at the New York Times making this argument. If you listen to the whole thing, which I recommend because it's interesting the reasoning he lays out, he goes out of his way to spend like a third of the essay being like, Biden is great and he's done amazing things and I think he's fantastic. And, as a president, I really think he's delivered and I think he could continue to deliver. My issue is if he's not able to, run a normal campaign, if he's not able to sit for interviews, and he goes through the metrics of how few interviews and how few press avails Joe Biden has actually done, that he worries he won't be able to beat Trump. And also I thought noteworthy and important here, Saagar, is that he doesn't just leave it up to like a hope and a prayer. He lays out specifically, okay, here's what would need to happen. You would need people like Nancy Pelosi, Ron Klain, Anita Dunn, whoever, to convince Biden to drop out. Then it goes to the convention at the DNC. And we've had in the past, it's not in either of our lifetimes, but in the past, these things were decided at the convention. There is a process for picking a candidate on the convention floor, and they could do that at the DNC, and that could work out and would make for a lot more compelling and interesting campaign TV than just the anointment of this, these are my words now, tired old man that everyone, is concerned about can't even make it through another 4 years.
No, it's very well. I mean, look, I when I say well argued, I just mean not the parts about how Biden is so fantastic.
He knows his audience.
You're right. But I mean, it's interesting to me that both Silver and Ezra both point to the Super Bowl as such a massive jump-off point. They're like, how, in good conscience, and you, as a sitting president of the United States, pass up the opportunity to speak to 112 million people? We had the ratings afterwards, Krystal. It was the most watched event in the United States since the Apollo moon landing. That's the truth. I've said it before. The very last thing that unites this country at all is the Super Bowl and football specifically. Why would you not go out of your way? The point that he also makes is that Biden has given fewer than 100 interviews. Quote, most of them are softballs. He'll go on Conan O'Brien's podcast or Jay Shetty's Mindfulness. The Biden team says they need apolitical voters, the ones who are not listening to political media. A great way to reach apolitical voters? The Super Bowl. But if you do that, you got to go sit down with Face the Nation. You got to be asked questions about Israel. The other thing that he points to, which is just so obvious, and again, it just bears mentioning, is, quote, go watch a speech he gave in Pennsylvania kicking off his campaign in 2019. Now go give a speech he gave last month. It's not close. There's no comparison. They're on YouTube, and you can see it. The way he moves, the energy in his voice. Democrats denying his decline are only fooling themselves. He's right. And yet, why is it that, lone voice? Silver can say whatever he wants. He no longer works for ABC. It's true, to a certain extent, it took some courage to say something like this. But I just want to underscore exactly what you said. The modern campaign, as we know it, really was born throughout the 1960s, and specifically 1968 or so, with Hubert Humphrey and Robert F. Kennedy, and the way that the primary system, as we kind of currently know it, really stemmed from the JFK campaign. Prior to that, we had a very similar system through which he lays out here. In many cases, Krystal, we would not even know who was really running for president until the convention. I mean, think about it. It was only 6 weeks out or whatever from election day. These 2-year-long elections, I mean, in some cases, it really is only 2008, the Iowa caucus battles that began a year before that. How recent, the current insanity really seems for all of us. So there's no reason, given his age, why we can't revert a little bit back to tradition.
I mean, listen, I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd be cheering for the DNC to just take control and pick a candidate at the convention, but that's where we are. So I think it is very noteworthy for this case to be made publicly in the pages of the New York Times, given how much elite circles pay attention to what is written at the New York Times and what is said at the New York Times. I mean, I wonder what you think, Saagar. Do you think there's a chance that he does drop out, that these people do, have some sort of come to Jesus moment and really put pressure on him to leave the race, and that he's ultimately persuaded by that?
absent a major health event, and I'm not talking like a stroke, something debilitating, he's running. That's what I think. I think that, I mean, look, the party system is also very weak. He is the commander-in-chief. He's the executive. The people around him have been in Biden indoctrinated. They've been preaching the tune that he's completely fine. You can't just flip on a dime. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, like they've all given their shibboleths about how he's the smartest, most sharp man to ever live in the Oval Office. How can you reverse? You would look like an idiot. So this is all played out. The system, the architecture, and all of that would be needed for something like this. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Really what it is, and it comes back to, and he even points to this, is at the end of the day, the candidate is the person who matters the most. Biden is an egomaniac and arrogant. And if anything, what do we always know about age? It only makes you more of what you already are.
Yeah.
He was stubborn in '88. You think he's gonna be less stubborn when he's old? I don't know a single old person who became less stubborn with age. Especially, one of the most common characteristics is that they cling to what they can control as they get older and older. That's where he is, and he's decided to put all of our fates with him. Like you said, it can sound mean and all of this, but most people who are his age are in very peaceful retirement, who are hanging out with their grandchildren and others. And to the extent that he feels any responsibility to the American people, he's decided that he's the sole judge of his character, and he'll leave it up to the voters. So it's up to him.
I did think it was noteworthy that Ezra pointed not to, here's a performance of Biden when he was vice president. But here's just a few years ago when he was launching this campaign and how much he's declined, like notably, clearly declined. And they both basically made the case that the reason he's not doing these interviews is actually rational. Like from his campaign team's perspective, from his aides' perspective, it is their best possible bet because they think the performance would be that bad.
Right.
And, that was demonstrated in the press conference that he attempted to give to try to assuage concerns that he was old and basically losing it, and then mixes up Mexico and Egypt within the course of 15 minutes. And as we've said before, it'd be one thing if it's a one-off, like everybody misspeaks sometimes, it happens regularly. But the fact that it happens in this way, basically every time he's in front of a camera, is pretty telling. And obviously the American people have already decided, 86% of them have already decided this man is too old to be able to really run and serve again. The other issue that I can't remember if one or both of them got into it, but part of the challenge for those around Biden too is they don't have confidence in Kamala Harris. And she is the next most likely person to take up the mantle. I mean, if Biden were to drop, she would have the inside track to replace him as the Democratic nominee. And the fact that her approval ratings have consistently been below his, and she has not proven herself to be an able campaigner. She herself has not done all that many interviews and has not been all that comfortable in front of the camera either, and has a tendency to say like weird, rambling, nonsensical, word salady mumbo jumbo. So I think that's another reason why people around Biden have convinced themselves that he is the best bet. There was an interesting piece over at CNN, though. I'm curious what you think about this one. That I think this one was, very much planted by Kamala's team about how she understands that there are problems with the campaign and she's trying to ride to the rescue. She's trying to work it out. She's having all these meetings behind the scenes, trying to save this campaign and adjust course and make it better, make it responsive to voters, et cetera. Put this up on the screen. They interviewed 24 sources. CNN did, and they said that Harris has been gathering information to help her penetrate what she sometimes refers to as the bubble of Biden campaign thinking, telling people she's aiming to use that intelligence to push for changes in strategy and tactics that she hopes will put the ticket in better shape. There were some specific concerns from prominent politicians that were mentioned here. The fact that they had these specific concerns on the record was kind of interesting. So they said Representative Debbie Dingell has pushed Kamala repeatedly to get the White House to take more seriously how hard Biden's response to the Gaza war is hitting Arab Americans in her home state of Michigan. Steve Horsford, the Nevada congressman and Congressional Black Caucus chair, urged Harris to get the administration to talk more about housing affordability rather than the triumphant and often disconnected talk about Bidenomics. At a session around Harris's dining table last Saturday with 6 Democratic governors and their chiefs of staff, according to multiple people who were there, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer slammed the way the president and the campaign have been talking about abortion. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker hammered Biden's response to the migrant crisis and insisted they need to quickly get much more aggressive about attacking Republicans and Trump for tanking the bipartisan immigration bill. Maryland Governor Wes Moore complained that the campaign has been failing to get through to voters under 35 years old. So interesting that all these concerns are being made known, but the one thing that you could adjust your strategy or what you're doing on any range of number of issues, but you aren't going to be able to change Biden's cognitive abilities or his age and how old he will be if he is once again sworn in as president of the United States.
Right, and that's what they're like. Talk about housing affordability. It's like the ship has sailed on this stuff years and years ago. How many people can go roll the tape? How many discussions, Chris, did we have in 2021 about you need to be active about fighting inflation? If you let it just continue, then you're going to lose the narrative. You're going to show people that you don't particularly care. And then they just caught up and they're like, no, everything is actually fine. They want people to just, erase their eyes and not realize there's been a 20-something% year-over-year inflation from 2019 to where we are right now. That's insane. 1/5 price increase. People don't just look quarter by quarter. They experience their life, on a very different timeline. So there's so many things within this that are just stupid. But the real one, and we just can't go away from, is people hate Kamala even more than they hate Biden. So it's one of those where how are you supposed to save anything? On an interpersonal level, people cannot stand you. It's not like they're waiting for you to come in as a savior. That's also, by the way, a huge part of how we have a very weak Democratic Party, where you don't have the ability for someone like Gavin Newsom, who, look, I'm not a Gavin Newsom fan. You cannot deny he's very politically talented. He's very politically talented. And more importantly, he loves the fight. He's itching to be able to get into the ring. He just simply is constrained both by media and the criticism that he'd be usurping a black woman and the most successful president or whatever. And that's actually a sign of tremendous weakness in the American political system, to not allow somebody to come in the other way, especially when the base. The thing is about Trump is strong. The base likes him. Now, the rest of the country may not. But as a party, it shows that he is in control. The Democrats don't like Biden, and yet he's still somehow in control. Yeah. That's actually nuts.
They have affection for him.
Yes.
They do not want him to be the nominee or the president again. They would like to have other options. Just to play sort of like political fantasy football here for a minute, I do think if it came down to convention, because of the reasons that you just cited with Gavin Newsom, I mean, he is like the ultimate political animal, not only in terms of his capabilities, demonstrating like his debate versus Ron DeSantis, his comfort going into, difficult spaces, et cetera, but also he is the ultimate, behind the scenes backslapper and networker. I guarantee you many of the DNC delegates feel like they know him personally, have had some interaction with him. He's the type who has been for years and years and years at this point flying around the country to go to different Democratic dinners and make sure he's pressing the flesh with whoever the key, state party chairs are in different places. And so if it did come down to that, and especially since he's from the same state as Kamala Harris, if it was looking like the California delegation is going for Gavin over Kamala, which I think they would, if he had the balls to do it over, over the historic first black woman vice president, if he had the balls to do it, I do think the California delegation would go with him, and that would be a pretty devastating blow to Kamala Harris. But I mean, we're getting way over our skis now, just imagining all of these things. But I can't help but think about how this could potentially all play out. The other thing that I would say about that Kamala Harris riding to the rescue piece, which, as I said, paints her in a very favorable light, and I think was very much planted by her team, et cetera. I think she is also trying to burnish her image as a credible alternative if something was to happen to Biden or he was to drop out. So I also see this as a little bit of shadow maneuvering from Kamala to try to rehab her image so that people feel more comfortable if Biden was to step aside with go ahead and, pick the next in line vice president as the next Democratic nominee. So I read a little bit into that. The other thing that was interesting that we wanted to touch on here from the New York Times is this piece about how resistance liberals are feeling how they described as crisis out. They're exhausted after all these years of Trump and the existential threat and, every single election being completely existential and the energy they've put into that now for, a long time. They're feeling very burned out, which is not a great thing, that even the most faithful of the Democratic Party base are feeling kind of exhausted. Put this up on the screen. The headline here from the Times, anti-Trump burnout, the resistance says it's exhausted, bracing for yet another election against Donald Trump. America's liberals are feeling the fatigue. Quote, we're kind of like crisis out, one Democrat said. Let me read you the lead of this piece. They say, in 2017, they donned pink hats to march on Washington, registering their fury with Donald Trump by the hundreds of thousands. Then they flipped the House from Republican control, won the presidency, and secured a surprisingly strong showing. The 2022 midterm elections, galvanized by their conviction that Mr. Trump and his allies constituted a national emergency. This year, anti-Trump voters are grappling with another powerful sentiment, exhaustion. Quote, some folks are burned out on outrage, said Rebecca Lee Funk, the Washington-based founder of The Outrage, a progressive activism group and a purveyor of resistance-era apparel, LOL. People are tired. I think last election we were desperate to get Trump out of office, and folks were willing to rally around that singular call to action, and this election feels different. We're kind of like crisis out, said Shannon Casper, 36, a security guard in Pittsburgh, who called the prospect of a Trump-Biden rematch a dumpster fire. She added, it is crisis fatigue for sure. They have some poll numbers here to back up, you know, the anecdotal comments from the people that they interviewed, indicating that there are more Democrats saying they are exhausted by the political process and sort of dispirited by the whole situation than Republicans. You know, that could be a problem for them come election day. Although I have to say, you know, these people are going to vote for Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. They're not going to stay home. They're certainly not voting for Donald Trump. The question is more, you know, that activist energy. Are they going to get out there? Are they going to knock doors? Are they going to organize? Are they going to send in their $10, et cetera? I think that's more the issue here. And if you have a base that's like dispirited, depressed, exhausted, not excited about the candidate, and crisis out, that's obviously not a great thing going into an election.
What I find hilarious about it is that in 2017, when they were the most activated, compare that to the Trump of today. Ask yourself, which should you be more worried about? Shouldn't you be more of a resistance person, like post January 6th or not?
Yes.
If anything, they kind of blew
That's
it,
true.
you know, early on when they conjured up this like Hitlerian image, which wasn't real, and then it became like this cartoonish, whatever you want to call it right now, but unironically unlinked, at least from whatever forces were keeping him moored at the time. You should probably, if you were a resistance person, you should be way more afraid of Trump 2 than you should be if Trump won. But they've been exhausted. They tapped their coffers, you know, as much as they could back in, what was it, the 2018? That was like peak resistance, I think, for the election. Now, that said, I don't want to underestimate it. Even if they're exhausted, doesn't mean that you won't come out and vote on election day. I will not ever sit here and, you know, underestimate the actual power of an anti-Trump vote. It doesn't just have to be resistance. A lot of people who are not resistance people will not vote for him. They may come to the ballot, or they may still hold their nose and vote for Biden. But as Silver put it at the very beginning of this block, what a risk. What a risk for the whole country that you're putting us all through.
That's right.
You know, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing to us?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly it. So, you know, fascinating to watch these machinations. I agree with you. I think it is highly unlikely that at this point Biden is actually convinced to step aside. But, you know, you do see some sort of palace intrigue, a little bit of, you know, behind the scenes drama with regards to Kamala Harris trying to bolster her image, with regards to a variety of insiders actually coming out and saying, all right, you need to drop out, and here's what the path looks like. So, you know, we'll wait and see if there are additional developments, but I also am not hopeful that anything will actually change.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.